Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, as we find ourselves in the Zman of the 9 days in the week of Tisha B'Av, what a person encounters, especially when we read the writings of the tzaddikim with regards to Binyan Beis Hamikdash and how we're meant to contemplate or pay attention to the fact that there's a Churban in the world, that the Beis Hamikdash, the bias is not around for us. The thing that we want most desperately is not available to us. And when a person finds themselves in Kinos, and when a person finds themselves in the Haftorahs and the Parshios associated with the Churban, one encounters a very basic theme that is taking place over and over and over again, which I personally believe is one that can be reflected in day-to-day life on a very, very practical level. In the process of engaging with the fact that there's an exile, in the process of being mitmoded, paying attention, contemplating, and gazing unflinchingly into the very nature of the fact that the thing that we need so desperately is not present, there is an undying desire and a willingness towards effort of yearning and the attempt to overcome the exile and to find redemption, to overcome the despondency and find joy, to overcome the difficulty and find the smooth, easy street, to overcome the prevention and uncover the smooth process in which one can encounter the redemption of themselves as well as the collective redemption. And in spite of the fact that we desire and we begin again with our desire and we push and we push and we push, nevertheless, we keep on being pushed back and we return and retreat back into ourselves with a certain level of added hopelessness, added despondency, because not only have I not made it the first 5 times, but now I've failed the 6th time as well. And this running and retreating, this attempting to break through and encountering a lock or a blockage in one's life and a retreat backwards, and then overcoming the tendency towards hopelessness, to regather my strengths, to run forward again, only to be turned back and to retreat backwards over and over and over again throughout all of the years of exile and all of the individual moments of one's life, can lead to a certain type of spiritual exhaustion, a psychological exhaustion, of having tried and trying again and naturally not even wanting to give up hope, but looking at the circumstances of reality and perhaps coming, God forbid, to the mistaken conclusion that it's unbreakable. I can't break through the divide, I can't break through the barrier, and I can't find the light of Gula in my life. Now, this experience of pushing forward and retreating backwards, this Rutz of a Shov, could be looked at in 2 ways. We can look at the process of attempting to break through the barriers of exile only for the sake of breaking through to the other side of redemption. And the goal of that attempt to break through will only be valuable, will only be elevated into a space of significance if and when I finally break through. Meaning to say that the process and the attempt to run forward over and over and over again, to persevere, in spite of the fact that each time I try and break free, it doesn't maintain any essential value. Nevertheless, when I do break free, when I finally do find redemption, when the Beis Hamikdash is truly built, then I'll come to see how all of the attempts and all of the efforts to break through and to come in contact with the prevention will be seen as valuable. Now, that's a wonderful way to look, and it's a way of looking that tells us that in spite of the fact that the present is not good, in the future there will be such a revelation that will shed light back on our awareness of the present moment right now, thereby revealing retroactively that in truth it was also part of the process. That even though we don't see it as being significant because we're trying but we can't break free, we're trying but we can't break free, nevertheless all of that trying will eventually lead to a breakthrough, which will then elevate and give value to the process itself. But there comes a certain point in a person's life, there comes a certain point in a person's exile where that's no longer enough. It's not enough to anticipate a future time where the light of unity that is revealed in the future will retroactively shine the light of significance on the process that we've gone through in exile. Because right now, we believe in redemption. We know redemption will arrive, but right now we're tired. And the exhaustion of the attempt to push forth every second only to retreat backwards, that we believe is going to be valuable, but we have a difficult time, nearly an impossible time, finding the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the here and now, because we're exhausted from all of the attempts. There's a famous Maisa, one of my favorite Maisim, that Udal, the daughter of the Baal Shem Tov, was walking along with the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and the Chavraya Kadisha, and they were waiting to arrive at a krechma. They were waiting to arrive at an inn, at a hotel, at a malon where they can rest their heads for the night. And as the journey prolonged and the rain began to beat down on their heads and the roads grew muddier and the lightning grew louder, Udal would say to her father, Ta, when are we going to be there? Abba, when are we going to be there? And the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh would respond that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to help. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to help. We're going to get there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to help. We're going to get there. And she remained silent, and they continued on this journey, on this arduous journey, only to find that the rain was getting harder and the darkness was getting stronger. And Udal came back to her father and says, Abba, what is going to be? We need to find a place to sleep. And he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to provide. We're going to find our way. And after 2-3 more times of this happening, Udal, S'chusi Yogan Aleinu, said to her father, I understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to help us when we get there, but who's going to help us until we get there? Where are we going to find the help until we get there? And that's a similar question that needs to be asked. We know that Geula will arrive. We know that all of the pain will be washed away. We know that all of our experiences will be seen through the redemptive light of the future. But what about now? How do we see that before the redemption? How do we learn to enable ourselves to gain a little bit more strength in this process of banging on the door for redemption and being pushed back? If that's our avoida, Klal Yisrael is ready to do that avoida, but Rebbeinu Shalom, how do we value it? How do we find the illumination of the experience of what seems to be a simply failed attempt at redeeming ourselves, a failed attempt at finding that menachem meshiv nafshi, at finding that redemption and that comfort of the soul? So one of the most significant teachings that come along to illuminate the process over here is teachings from Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman in numerous places teaches us that when a person encounters a prevention in their lives, when there's something that's blocking the person from breaking through towards their point of intention and destination, so there are going to be menios along the way. There are going to be preventions along the way. There are going to be things from other people, from myself, from the world, from God, that are ultimately going to prevent me, theoretically, from getting to my desired position. And these menios, these preventions, in spite of the fact that they're exhausting and they're existentially bewildering, and they create a sense of hopelessness within the self, nevertheless, and in spite of all things, we know that these menios, these preventions, these things that block us, will eventually be seen to be transformed into moments of ne'imus, into moments of comfort. But Rabbi Nachman over here is giving us a new level of insight. He's not just saying that once we get over the mania, once we break free from that prevention, we'll come to uncover the light of godliness that exists on the other side. Rabbi Nachman is very careful to say over and over and over again that the mania itself is an encounter with God, that the tzara itself is an encounter with God, that the prevention that is blocking me from encountering the level of godliness or redemption that I would like to experience is the very site wherein I am encountering my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe nigash el ha'arfel kisham hu elokim. And Moshe Rabbeinu, every neshama of Klal Yisrael, goes into the arfel, goes into that confusion, into that concealment, into the cloudy nature of things, into the bilbul hadas and the yeyush and the tendencies towards yeyush and the defense mechanisms that we have against yeyush, and we go into the arfil, we go into that cloudy nature of experience, the cloud of unknowing, and we find the encounter with godliness specifically within there. It's not that the tzara will be overcome and then I will come to find the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but rather within the tzara itself, within the difficulty itself, within the prevention, if I can look around and take a look at what is happening to me right now. I am experiencing a frustrated spiritual activity. I am experiencing the frustration of the fact that my desired outcome has not taken place. Now, I can wait until my desired outcome takes place, or I can say that even though my desired outcome is not taking place, nevertheless, I can value, ideally, my desire, my motivation, the attempts that I've put in, and I come to understand myself in a much deeper way in terms of how I relate to the failures in my life. How do I relate to the arrested development? How do I relate to the frustrating partitions that block me? And if a person responds with anger and uselessness, as if these moments in time are meaningless because they haven't led to the desired position that I want to be in, then a person is not utilizing the tzara and is not utilizing the mania as an encounter with godliness. When a person finds themselves in choshech, it's not that, oh, I wish I could break free of this choshech and find the or. The or is going to come when HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows the or to come, and it's our job and our responsibility to do everything in our power to bring about the or. But when push comes to shove and we come in contact with the powerlessness that we have to shift from the darkness into the light because of circumstances beyond our control, even within ourselves, then we come to settle into the mania itself, and we come to find the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the prevention. Rabbi Nachman describes that this is the very nature of what we're doing on Tisha B'Av. The entire nature of Tisha B'Av is kinos, is a lamentation. Lament is not simply a language of saying, oh, I'm so sad things are this way. I'm so sad things are broken. I'm so sad the Beis HaMikdash is not present. I'm so sad I don't have that place of Yishuv Yeshiv Hadas, I'm so sad that my spirit, my body, my mind, the other, this, that is out of control. That's not what lamentations are. Lamentations are when a person comes to the end of language and there's nothing else that I can say to describe that I can't break free from this final frontier, this barrier, this position that is blocking me from redemption at this late point in history. When I come to the end of language, when I have come to a place of hopelessness in language, then I discover the language of hopelessness, meaning to say that kinos are not simply a hopelessness that kills language, but it's transforming our moments of hopelessness, our moments of difficulty, into a language and an encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. The kinos are a way of relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our exhaustion. The fact that in the end of the day, when all is said and done, all we can say is to describe what we can't say and what we don't have. But Rabbi Nachman says all of these kinos, all of this lamentation, all of this language at the edge of itself, where we're trying to communicate with the Rebbeinu Shalom what we feel so deeply, but we don't even have the words to describe anymore. So Rabbi Nachman says that if we look at the word kinos, if we look at the word for lamentation, what we come to find is that it's the exact same letters as tikkun. It's the exact same letters as rectification. Because in truth, the kinos and the rectification are not two separate stages. Yes, the kinos will lead to a place where we no longer have to say kinos, be'ezras Hashem. But for the time being, kol zman that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to continue saying kinos, that's what we're supposed to be doing. As Rav Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern Shlita says, that on every ounce of ourselves, we have to desire the Beis HaMikdash, but at the same moment, we have to realize that if this is how Hashem wants it, then it's not up to me whether the Beis HaMikdash is built right now, and I have to see to it that this is the ideal spiritual position for me to be in. I have to cultivate the desire towards the fixing, but also the acceptance of the fact that if it's not fixed, then my job is to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu within the kinos themselves. And at that point, the kinos are meshapech to a tikkun. And the encounter with the avelus, the encounter with the destruction, the encounter with the absence, and the transformation of our own personal pain and misgiving to an awareness of the fact that Rebbeinu Shalom, there's a part of you in me, there's a Shekhinah, there's your presence that dwells within this worldly experience, and all of my pain is a reflection of the Shekhinah's pain, and all of my struggles are a reflection of the Shekhinah's struggles. Then I can take all of the menios and all of the difficulty and all of the kinos, and I can transform them into moments of closeness, moments of encounter. I remember seeing a video of Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern Shlita a few years ago saying kinos on Tisha B'Av, and what you see with true tzaddikim is as they're sitting on their chairs of avelus, as they're crying tears of Shchinta Begalusa, as they're crying the collective tears of Klal Yisrael and each and every ounce of the unbearable suffering that each and every home may be going through, and hopefully that will be redeemed on every level. But you see in the true tzaddikim, there's a sobbing, there's a crying, but it's part of the avodah. There is no less of a connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom on Tisha B'Av than there is on Yom HaKippurim or Rosh Hashanah. It's just a different way of relating to the Rebbeinu Shalom. As the Kashnitzer Maggid Avodas Yisrael says, that what can be metukan on Tisha B'Av in that encounter with the menio, with that prevention, with that exile, it's incapable and it's impossible to uncover that light of redemption anywhere else. The same way that Pesach offers its own gifts, so does Tisha B'Av. So does the hidden gift of the Ostes in the Aleph Beis, Tisha B'Av, the Ostes, which represents the hidden goodness that is hidden away within the very fact that it's hidden away. The fact that something is not present now is the very light that I am in need of seeking and cultivating and uncovering to find the redemption within the problem itself. This wordplay, these linguistic shifts or tzirufim that the Baal Shem Tov and his students seem to be playing around with. The fact that kinos is the same letters as tikkun, so on the one hand, that's a nice hermeneutical principle, it's a nice shift, but it doesn't represent anything. But here we have to uncover one of the deeper secrets of what the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh was coming to teach us with regards to his shifting of levels, shifting of letters, that for the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh we see very often, and this is following a long line of Mekubalim who preceded the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, who the Baal Shem Tov utilized very much, which is called Sirufe Osios, reframing the letters. There's a tzara, a tzadi reish hey, or there's a nega, there's a blemish, nun gimel ayin. So b'derech klal, when we look at a problem, we assume that here's the problem and the solution is outside of the problem, and we have to draw the solution into the problem, replace the problem with the solution, and then we get to live in the solution. But what we've come to understand very clearly in our own lives and the collective life of history is that any attempt to move away or displace the problem, repress the problem, suppress the problem, only in the hopes of replacing it or suturing that wound with a solution will either give way to a deeper expression of the problem, or that solution will be revealed to be part of the problem itself. itself. We cannot run away from the problem. We cannot run away from that which needs to be fixed. That which doesn't need to be fixed, we have to leave aside, and that which we can fix, we have to leave aside as well. But when it comes to that which is fixable in our lives, when I can identify what I can work on, at that point, I need to fix it. I can't run away with it. And so when I'm looking at a tzara, when I'm looking at a tzadi reish hey, which represent the three spiritual building blocks of a tzadi, a reish, and a hey, what I'm doing is I'm not running away from that tzara. I'm taking the very tzara itself and rearranging the letters to create ritzeh, which is ratzon, which is a moment of peacefulness and calmness and desire. Reish tzadi hey. What I've done is I've taken the very same building blocks, the same DNA of the problem, and I have forced the problem itself to give me the gift of the redemption from the problem. Like we've spoken about so often, the doubled nace of mamtik mar b'mar, of sweetening the bitter with the bitter, or tzachti mitzrayim b'mitzrayim, refining the heaviness of Mitzrayim with the heaviness of Mitzrayim itself, or mineu be avenagre, that from the forest itself comes the handle for the axe. The forest is the prevention, and the thing that will help me cut down the prevention comes from the very prevention itself. When I'm looking at a nega, when I'm looking at a blemish in myself, instead of trying to remember, oh, I can run around and pretend that that blemish doesn't exist, if I'm vulnerable enough and I allow myself to sit with that blemish, then I can come to uncover how within this blemish itself is the light of oneg, is ayin nun gimel. And we have countless examples where it's really the same osios, the same letters, simply being rearranged, because the secret of unity is that wherever we are, we have what we need. And very often it's a question of reorienting ourselves or rearranging the letters and re-scrambling the things that we own and the things that we have internally to uncover the redemption that we're so deeply looking for. One of the places that this comes out most clearly is in the Baal HaSulam, the Heilige Baal HaSulam, Schus Yogan Aleinu. The Baal HaSulam spoke about two levels of Manoilim and Pischin. The Baal HaSulam, based on the Zohar Kadosh, spoke about locks and doors. Locks and doors, locks and openings, preventions and openings. And after describing how the world is saturated with all different types of situmim, all different moments of closedness or restriction or constriction, where I come upon a moment and I find that I can't move forward into the destination that I would like to go into, the Baal HaSulam says as follows: this process of encountering preventions and trying to break through is the secret of the locks that are placed on the gates, the things that block us. Because in truth, all of the stiros, all of the preventions, all of the blockages, all of the manios, all of the difficulty and all of the locks that we encounter blocking us from tasting the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, even though that in the beginning they seem to detract and distract us from the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Baal HaSulam says that in spite of all of the preventions, in spite of all of the difficulty, nevertheless we put in all of our effort and all of our intensity, and we allow our effort to be intensified by way of the prevention, and we're doing everything for the sake of being mashpia nachas ruach to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to receive from Hashem in order to recognize Hashem's glory. And we take all of the kochos of pirud, we take every moment of mania and prevention, and we don't allow it to have an impact on us. We don't allow it to detract from our hope and our love that we have for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As kol stira v'stira shehiskabrenu aleha, then every prevention and every blockage and every lock that a person has been meritorious to find God in, to overcome, na'asis shar lahasagas chachmas yisbarach. The prevention itself becomes a new gate of understanding the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that cannot have been understood beforehand. Ki kol stira yesh bo segula miyuchedes legalis madrega miyuchedes b'asagas yisbarach. Because every prevention and every degradation and every contraction and every contradiction and every concealment reveals a new way of coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'ilu hazachayim shezachim lezeh, and those who have been meritorious to find this, nimsaim metzhapchin chashu cholenehuro miriru lemasika. Those are the ones who have the ability to transform darkness into light and bitterness into sweetness. Ki koiches hapirid kulam, because all of the strengths of prevention and separation, hein me bechinas cheshkas haseichel, they're all an expression and an element of the darkening of the mind. Hein me bechinas miruras haguf, whether it comes about because of the severity and the intensity of being in a body. Na'asu lahem sha'arim lahasagos madrigos niskavos. At that point, all of those things are transformed into levels of encountering godliness in the deepest way imaginable. V'nasa ha'choshech la'or gadol, and darkness itself is transformed into a light. V'hamar na'aseh matok, and the difficulty, the bitterness is going to be transformed into the sweetness itself. Because in truth, there are many, many things in this world. There are strong locks on those gates. At that point, the gates are there to block us, to keep us away from the Rebbeinu Shleilim. And therefore, those manios, those preventions in our lives, are referred to as man oilim. They're referred to as locks that we encounter. Ki soitzrim es share es karvus, because they close off the gates of coming close to the Rebbeinu Shleilim, umarchikin oisanim Hashem Yisbarach, and they push us away from the Rebbeinu Shleilim. Aval im anu miskabrim aleihem. But if we have the wherewithal to push through and to find the light of godliness that exists within the problems themselves, shelo yashpiu aleinu litzanin ahavasenu Yisbarach milibenu, and we don't allow them to cool off the love and the burning desire that we have towards the Rebbeinu Shleilim in our hearts. At that moment, the very key itself is transformed into the opening. And the darkness is transformed to light. Because each and every moment of difficulty, every thought of difficulty, every feeling of difficulty that we encounter in this world can be transformed into an opening. To an experience of grasping HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then once we've transformed the difficulty and the concealment of that blockage, of that lock, and we allow it to open ourselves up to realize that here's a Pesach, on the next level we enter into the gates of Kedusha. This is the derech into Kedusha. The derech into Kedusha, the derech into Geula, the derech into the willingness to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our lives is to feel the prevention, to say, Rebbeinu Shleilim, I am trying, I'm trying, I want you, I want to break free, I want to find you, I want to live a life of connectivity to you, I want to believe in you, I want to believe in your Olam Haba, I want to believe in your Torah, I want to believe in the goodness of myself and the goodness of others and the goodness of the world, I want to believe in calmness, I want to believe in my capacity to find the infinite expression of godliness to the degree that symptom doesn't even take place whatsoever. I want to be zoicha to the tzaddikim. I want to feel that the tzaddikim are speaking to me specifically, and that unlike anybody else in the history of the world, I have the ability to hear the words of the tzaddikim in a way that will bring Mashiach. We want all of this. We want the mitzvos. We want the Torah. We want to have a hargasha of washing the tzilas yadayim and saying a bracha and being able to say Baruch Ata Hashem, of being close to the Rebbeinu Shleilim. It's the only way a person can survive in this world. It's the only thing that we're searching for. It's the desire that keeps us going in spite of all things. And when a person overcomes that natural despondency that comes about, when I realize that year after year, month after month, week after week, day after day, hour after hour, moment after moment, I'm unable to break free towards where I want to go to, instead of falling into the pits of despondency and saying Beis HaMikdash is still broken, I can build my Beis HaMikdash there. And Mikdash Melech Ir Melucha, when I start building the Beis HaMikdash out of my own Churban, out of the Churban of my Beis HaMikdash, I come to find that these are the very stones that the new Beis HaMikdash is going to be built out of. The Mafteach, then the gate opens up, and the lock that was blocking us from entering in becomes the very pathway upon which we enter in. And at that point, we're going to say, Samchenu Kimoy Sanisanu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gladden us like the days of our intensity, gladden us like the days of the darkness. Because what we're going to come to find is that these days of prevention, these days of constriction, these days of concealment force us to come in contact with ourselves far more than ease and careless movement along the rungs of spiritual growth would allow us to come in contact with. It is specifically within the mania that we have the ability to find the neimus. It is specifically within the block that we have the ability to overcome. It is specifically within the lock that we have the ability to realize that be'emes, the lock is also an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then we can transform the Kinos into Tikkun, and we can transform the Tisha B'Av into the Ois Tes and the Aleph Beis, which is the Toif HaGonas. As the Meshiloach says, Tes is such a heilige thing. It's a hidden goodness that any pasuk that is 9 or associated with 9 hides a secret of Geula, because the redemption is hidden within the concealment itself. The redemption is simply a further expression of the Aleph that was hidden within exile. And when we can uncover that, we can encounter every moment in our lives with an equanimity and a willingness to feel what they're giving us, to feel what those moments are offering us, but nevertheless to persevere forward and to be resistant and to ignore the all too natural human need towards despondency and hopelessness, and to say to the Ribono Shel Olam, I don't care if you kick me out of your Gan Eden, I don't care if you kick me out of your Olam Haba, I don't care if you take Olam Haza away from me, I just want you, I want to find you in spite of all of the preventions and all of the blockages that you give me. And in that way, a person will break through to the other side, and a person will Pisayim Yavo El Melech, and a person will find themselves standing in the base of the king. And then we can find the light of the tzaddikim sitting in Kinos and tasting a light of tikkun, because they're very well aware that in accordance with our feeling of the Kinos, in accordance with our feeling of the prevention, so too will be the redemption and the relief that comes about when I realize that all of that intensity was also a way of finding a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And in that way, we can transform these days into days of simcha and his karvas Kadosh Baruch Hu, that transform darkness into light and bitterness into sweetness, Be'ezras Hashem.